Boarding a routine flight from New York to Los Angeles, the hum of engines lulling passengers into a false sense of security. But high above the clouds, turbulence strikes, not from the weather, but from an unforeseen mechanical failure that sends the plane into a nosedive. The captain's voice crackles over the intercom, laced with desperation, pleading for any fighter pilot on board to step forward. Amid the chaos, eyes turn to a black woman in economy class, fast asleep, her presence dismissed by those around her. Little do they know, her unassuming demeanor hides a heroic past forged in the skies of combat. As panic spreads, the true storm brews, not just in the air, but in the hearts of those blinded by prejudice. Dr. Elena Thompson boarded Flight 287 that crisp autumn morning, her carry-on tucked neatly under the seat as she settled into 23B. A renowned aerospace engineer now, Elena had left behind a decorated military career, but the scars of her service lingered beneath her composed exterior. At 42, with her coiled hair tied back and a simple blouse accentuating her poised frame, she appeared to most as just another traveler, perhaps a professor or consultant heading to a conference. The plane, a bustling Boeing 737 filled with business executives, families, and tourists, taxied smoothly down the runway at JFK, the city skyline fading into the distance. As the aircraft climbed to cruising altitude, Elena felt the familiar pull of exhaustion. Her week had been grueling. Back-to-back lectures on aviation safety at a university symposium where she'd shared insights from her time as one of the few black female fighter pilots in the U.S. Air Force. The audience had applauded politely, but she couldn't shake the subtle undercurrents, the sidelong glances, the whispered doubts about her credentials. It was a pattern she'd known since childhood in a small southern town where her dreams of flying were met with skepticism rooted in the color of her skin. Reclining her seat slightly, Elena closed her eyes, letting the steady drone of the engines coax her into sleep. Around her, passengers chatted idly. A white businessman in the aisle seat grumbled about delays, while a flight attendant offered drinks with practiced smiles. No one paid Elena much mind. To them, she blended into the background, her expertise invisible behind assumptions shaped by years of systemic bias. The plane proceeded uneventfully at first, slicing through the vast blue expanse over the Midwest. But as the hours ticked by, an imperceptible shift began, a faint vibration in the fuselage that the crew dismissed as minor turbulence. Elena stirred briefly, her pilot's instincts twitching, but fatigue won out, pulling her back into slumber. Unbeknownst to the passengers, the plane's hydraulic system was faltering, a rare glitch that could compromise control surfaces. The cockpit crew monitored it closely, hoping to reach LAX without incident. Elena's presence, had it been known, might have changed everything from the start. But in a world quick to overlook black excellence, her story remained untold, building an undercurrent of curiosity about what hidden strengths lay dormant in seat 23. As the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, the initial vibrations escalated into ominous shudders, rattling overhead bins and spilling coffee from trays. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, gripping armrests as the aircraft dipped unexpectedly. In the cockpit, alarms blared softly at first, then insistently, the hydraulic failure spreading to the ailerons, making steering increasingly erratic. The captain, a seasoned veteran with graying hair, furrowed his brow, radioing air traffic control for an emergency landing clearance. But the nearest airport was hours away, and the situation deteriorated rapidly. Elena awoke with a start, her body attuned to the unnatural pitch of the engines. Rubbing her eyes, she scanned the cabin, fear etched on faces, a child whimpering in the row ahead, the businessman beside her muttering under his breath about incompetent pilots. The flight attendants moved with forced calm, securing loose items, but their eyes betrayed worry. Elena's mind raced back to her Air Force days, dogfights over hostile territories where quick thinking meant survival. She'd earned her wings in the early 2000s, one of only a handful of black women to pilot F-16s, facing not just enemy fire, but the relentless barrage of racism within the ranks. superiors questioning her abilities, peers isolating her, promotions delayed despite flawless records. Now, as the plane lurched again, Elena felt that old fire ignite. She unbuckled her seatbelt and approached a flight attendant, her voice steady amid the growing panic. But the attendant, a young white woman, waved her off dismissively, assuming Elena was just another frightened passenger seeking reassurance. "Please return to your seat, ma'am," the look implied, laced with an unconscious bias that undervalued her authority. Elena persisted, explaining her background, but the words fell on deaf ears, the attendant prioritizing a group of white executives who demanded updates. The injustice deepened as whispers spread through the cabin. Some passengers eyed Elena suspiciously when she tried to help, their prejudices surfacing in subtle ways, a woman clutching her purse tighter, a man scoffing at her suggestions to the crew. It mirrored the microaggressions she'd endured throughout her career, being passed over for missions, her expertise attributed to affirmative action rather than merit. Tension mounted as the plane's nose dipped sharply, oxygen masks deploying in a cascade of yellow. Screams echoed, hearts pounding in unison with the failing engines. Elena's frustration boiled beneath her calm facade. She knew the signs of hydraulic loss from simulations and real-world scrambles, but the crew, overwhelmed, hadn't yet broadcast the full urgency. As minutes stretched into an eternity, the plane banked unpredictably, clouds whipping past the windows. Passengers prayed silently, regrets flashing through minds. Elena, undeterred by the dismissals, made her way toward the front, her determination clashing against the invisible barriers of racial doubt. The stakes soared, not just for survival, but for proving that excellence knows no color, even as the plane hurtled toward potential disaster. The cabin descended into full-blown chaos as the plane plummeted, alarms wailing from the cockpit, passengers clinging to seats, faces pale with terror, the world outside a blur of spinning horizon. The captain's voice finally broke through the intercom, trembling yet resolute, urgently calling for any fighter pilot on board to assist in stabilizing the aircraft. The plea hung in the air like a lifeline, silencing the screams momentarily as eyes darted around in desperate hope. Elena surged forward, pushing past the skeptical flight attendant, who now stared in wide-eyed confusion. Reaching the cockpit door, she identified herself, her military ID in hand, a relic from her days commanding squadrons. The co-pilot, glancing back through the peephole, hesitated, his expression flickering with doubt. Was this black woman truly capable? But with no other options, the door clicked open, admitting her into the nerve center of the crisis. Inside, instruments flashed red, the yoke vibrating violently in the captain's grip. Elena assessed the panels instantly, her training kicking in like muscle memory. The hydraulic failure had crippled the primary controls, forcing reliance on manual overrides, a maneuver she'd executed in combat simulations under far worse odds. As the plane nosedived further, G-forces pressing everyone back, she guided the captain through emergency protocols, her hands steady on the auxiliary controls. The racial undercurrents that had dismissed her earlier now amplified the drama. The crew's initial reluctance melted into reliance, but not without a lingering tension born of ingrained biases. Wind howled against the fuselage as altitude dropped perilously, the ground rushing up through scattered clouds. Elena's mind flashed to past injustices, the times her warnings were ignored in briefings, leading to near misses attributed to team errors rather than prejudice. Here in this airborne crucible, she wrested control, adjusting flaps and thrust to counteract the dive. The plane groaned in protest, but slowly, agonizingly, it leveled out, the horizon stabilizing amid collective gasps from the cabin. In that peak of intensity, Elena's resolve shattered the barriers, her expertise undeniable as the aircraft clawed back stability. The captain, sweat beading on his forehead, nodded in silent acknowledgement, the moment a raw confrontation with the racism that nearly cost everything. With the plane steadied, the crew radioed for an emergency landing at a nearby airfield in Denver. Elena remained in the cockpit, monitoring systems as the aircraft descended safely, tires screeching on the runway amid cheers from relieved passengers. Paramedics and investigators swarmed the tarmac, but Elena slipped back to her seat quietly, her role in the salvation known to the flight crew at first. Word spread gradually, whispers turning to applause as the captain emerged to thank her publicly, his voice carrying a newfound respect. In the aftermath, investigations revealed the hydraulic flaw as a manufacturing defect, but the real story emerged in media reports. Elena's heroism amid the subtle racism that almost prevented her intervention. Passengers who had dismissed her came forward with apologies, their prejudices laid bare by the near tragedy. Elena, ever gracious, used the spotlight to advocate for diversity in aviation, speaking at forums about the systemic barriers Black women face, from hiring biases to overlooked contributions.